Welcome to the panel discussion that is all about clowning out of chaos. It's part of our conference. We're running a 3-day conference called Clowning Out of Chaos, and we're exploring what is the personal and political applications of clowning. So I'm Holly Stoppett, for those who don't know. Hello, I'm Holly Stoppett, and I am a drama therapist and a clown teacher and a facilitator and a director and a great maker of stir fry. Those are my main skills in life. And I'm one half of the Online Clown Academy, and the other half of the Online Clown Academy is Robin Hambrook, who I'm going to introduce you to now. Oh, here we go. Here's Robin. Yo. Ta-da!
Hi. Lovely to see you, not see you. See all the names pop up and all the places you are. Lovely.
Oh, thanks, Robin. Robin's going to be behind the scenes tonight. She's going to be dealing with the Q&A box and dealing with the chat box. So you won't see her, but you will feel her presence. So I'm going to send you back into the darkness. There we go. It's back to me again. So we set up the Online Clown Academy a year ago at the beginning of the pandemic because we wanted to create a space, an online digital space for adults to play and connect and meet. And so this is now the second of our conferences. We did one back in November. This is our second conference where we want to spend this whole weekend creating spaces for people to come together, to play, to chat, to learn, to laugh, and explore our theme of clowning out of chaos. So how is clowning going to help us out of this chaos that we're in? How is clowning going to help us with our inner chaos? How is clowning going to help us solve the problems of the world? Big questions. Luckily, we've got a big panel to have this discussion with tonight. So they're going to be introducing themselves in just a moment. But first of all, I will tell you a bit about this evening, a bit about this event. We're going to spend an hour just chatting, us lot, just us, this panel, and you can feed in your questions. You'll see at the bottom there's a Q&A. You should be able to see something that says Q&A, and if you put your questions in there, then I'm much more likely to see them. So I will be weaving your questions into the debate, and also throwing in some of my own questions through the next hour. At the end of the hour, then we will throw out the invitation for you to come up onto the screen as well. If you'd like to be part of this clown community, this global clown community, and feel a sense of our togetherness, then you can come up onto the screen and you can ask us questions, or you can ask questions in the Q&A box if that feels better for you. You can share something about your own practice, or you can just come and hang out with us and just have a little moment of feeling like, oh. So I think that's all I have to say to you. That is all I have to say to you. You're so very welcome. Do make yourselves comfy. I hope this is an interesting and stimulating debate for you. So without further ado, I am going to get the panel to introduce themselves. Who'd like to go first? Nobody. Amrita, is that you? Brilliant.
I'll go. Thank you so much, Holly, and as well, Robin, for putting this together and having me here. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and custodians of the land upon which I am gathered currently, which is in Desert Springs, California. And it's a Hohokam and their elders past, present, and emerging. And as we gather in a connected community online, I also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land outside of Desert Springs, California. Sovereignty has never been ceded. It always was and always will be First Nations land. I further recognize the past atrocities against the First Peoples of this land, and America was founded on the disposition and genocide of First Nations people. I acknowledge that colonial structures and policies remain in place today and recognize the ongoing struggle of the First Nations people in dismantling those structures. The struggle to seek justice and to remember and address this nation's past is ongoing and is a necessary requirement for individual and collective healing process. I further recognize that as a settler, saying these words is not enough. It is only a beginning. My words call me into action to support Indigenous-led grassroots change movements and campaigns, as well as a commitment to returning land. Hello, everyone. I am Amrita Kaur DHALIWAL, and my name is hard to pronounce. So if you mispronounce it, it's okay. Amrita, so I'll say that. And I'm gonna say a little bit about myself here. Yes, Holly, is that correct? I am oh my God, I hate intros. So I always struggle with them. So I'm gonna do the paper version, which is I'm a teacher, I'm managing director of the Idiot Workshop, which is like a contemporary clown. We say that it's between clown and bouffon. And I'm a maker of theater experiences. I'm also one of the co-founders of Operation Project, which is a creative activism group that came out of the great social justice movement that has taken the United States in this last year. And I guess my non-paper introduction is I'm Punjabi, first generation American. I'm definitely always questioning everything and seeking deeper meaning. When I met clown, it was like a revolutionary moment, and it just changed my life, and I've been in love with it ever since. And in a deep place of questioning clown as an art form, as a community, as a culture, as a tool, everything. So it's a really interesting time to be discussing this bigger question of clowning as the political and personal applications of it. So I'm really excited to dive into that and to hear other people's perspectives from that lens as well. So that's me.
Thanks so much. Thank you. Who would like to introduce themselves next? It's Jay Jordan.
Inspired in a way by the beautiful introduction that Amrita gave, I am speaking from land that was initially colonized by the Romans, from the kind of pagan people who were here, but recently was an attempted form of colonization by the kind of business elites of the French state, who tried to build an airport on these wetlands. And so I'm speaking from these wetlands that were saved from an airport, international airport project, because thousands of people put their lives and their bodies in the way and struggled for 40 years. And we are now living here trying to create the commons on these wetlands. I'm someone who loves edges, who loves in between, betwixt and between spaces. I particularly love the edge between art and activism, and for the last 25 years has been involved in trying to find that edge where the kind of pragmatic side of social justice work, i.e. really transforming society, is efficient, and the poetic, aesthetic, beautiful side of art is also efficient or beautiful. So trying to, and so that has involved things like working in the alter globalization movement, such as Reclaim the Streets, to right down to what I now do with my partner Isabelle Frémaux is we organize a collective that's called the Laboratory of Insurrectionary Imagination, where we bring artists and activists together. We've done that since 2004. We bring artists and activists together to create new forms of resistance, to create new forms of disobedience. So we refuse the idea of showing the world to people, but transforming it directly. And out of that laboratory came, once upon a time in 2004, the thing called the Clandestine Insurgent Rebel Clown Army. But I'm sure we'll get time to talk about that later.
Thanks so much. Wows. Who's next? Is it you, Susie?
It seems to be me. Hello. Just need to take a breath to take all of that in. I'm a little bit aware that I feel like I haven't been in many conversations where I don't know how it's going to go. And this feels so exciting. Like, whoa, listen to these two introductions. I call myself a specialist in joy and connection. And this came about because after many years of just following my nose, potentially sort of following my clown nose wherever I wanted to go, I ended up with this kind of a whole load of skills that made me look like somebody who didn't really have anything. You know, I just had a whole load of stuff. And then I kind of had to look at them and go, no, there is a focus here. This is all about sparking joy in humans and connecting humans. This is just really, it's really deeply important to me. This is, so I do it in children's hospitals, in care homes, in cinemas. I run events, or one day again I will, in cinemas called Everybody Friendly Screenings, where we watch a movie and I invite everybody. I create a container for everyone to be silly, really. And this last year, laughter yoga, which was in my back pocket as like one of the things I trained in 10 years ago to kind of help me be a clown who breathed a bit more, who laughed a little bit more. But this has kind of come to the fore and been what I do this last year. And I've been really almost every day looking at the news and going, I'm going to look at this through a clown's eyes, because if I don't do that, it's going to be far, far too depressing. So taking a clown's approach, and kind of saying, come with me on a clown's journey. So I think that's what I have to say right now. It's really lovely to be here.
Thanks, Susie. Jeff.
Già, sabici corascin pastigram pucci sai o pombaraton che revisando che ma e ci che stanti e bravo ci così mi meratoci pe pam robistante e bravo giungosi carrotti ciacca stanno le bra o ti che per foti rosti dambo brutta santone e perché ciacco c'arrastante. So I just want to say it's a lot of gibberish out there. There is a lot of gibberish out there. The world's gone absolutely mad. I mean, it's probably been mad forever, but it seems like it's gone even crazier. And I am in one of the craziest, probably one of the craziest spots. I live in Israel, 34 years. You can hear from my wonderful Israeli accent. I wasn't born here. Just been living here for 34 years. Just trying to be controversial, really. That's why I came to live here. I thought, where can I be most controversial, most provocative? I'll live in Israel. And so it's been an interesting one, interesting journey. I'm a performance activist, member of the Global Play Brigade, which came into existence in 2020. We're playing forevermore now for change, social change. I'm a clown and drama therapist, and I've combined clowning and drama therapy create a therapy for addictions, but it's a therapy just about for everybody. And a lot of people that come to me to work on their clown, and I think when I say work on the clown, I think we all have the clown role. We have many roles, and the clown role is one of them. It's a universal role, human, very human role. We can invoke, and it gives us permission to play. It gives us permission to restore balance within our lives. It gives us permission to do crazy things, to readdress the craziness around us, which means we can actually suggest normality in totally abnormal situations. So, and it allows me to go into, and I'll talk about this when we continue, it allows me to go into places in huge conflicts and just do my thing and change everybody's way of looking and doing things afterwards. So people aren't quite the same after a group of clowns come in. So that's how I see things. Clowning has a major impact in this world. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. Wow. Well, there we go. I mean, we've basically got the encyclopedia on clowning here. Polish up your questions, audience, if there's anything you want to know. I'm going to kick off with a question, my first question, which is, how have you met chaos through your work? Who'd like to speak about this?
Yeah, I'll go. If
Yes, thanks. Yes.
I'm in the rhythm now. I've got the momentum going. I've got the momentum going. So I've met chaos. I think personally, on a personal level, on a social level, and on a social level, and probably in just about everything I do, it's pretty chaotic. On a personal level, I think a lot of conflict within myself in terms of feeling torn between different roles that I played out and not ever feeling that I'm ever balanced with those roles. So one moment I'm an introvert, the next moment I'm an extrovert, and then one minute I've got super confidence, and the next minute I've lost it completely. And the clown somehow brought all this together in a way, because it's such a paradoxical role. It allows me to be both this and this. So wonderfully confident with my vulnerability and wonderfully courageous with my sense of panic, and a child and an adult at the same time. So there's no longer conflict between am I a big child or a small adult? So it released me from also a lot of this personal angst or this chaotic thinking, I think. So it created an order in a sense, and I think that's quite funny. Not too much order. I feel if I go too balanced, then I lose my creativity altogether. But it created a certain order within that chaos. And then I take clowning, after I felt it healed me, put clowning into places where I could use it for healing. So in hospitals, in elderly homes, and we're in hospices, so where people are feeling they've lost control completely of their bodies, of their lives, doing some really crazy stuff with them that they wouldn't imagine they can do in those situations, and changing their whole perspective and their feel of where they are. So that restores a certain order in their personal chaos in those situations. So feeling life's falling apart for them, by clowning around and playing with all that, it restores actually a sense of harmony. And it expands the possibilities of looking at things beyond the prism of the illness. So it's not just being ill or not being ill, it's being beyond that. It's just being more fully human. So that in that sense, politically, I've gone just recently. Good example.
Can we come back to political in one moment?
Just
because I just know that Susie has got such a connection to what you're saying. Would you like to speak about the clown and control?
Yeah, I love what you've just said there, Jeff. Particularly about the permission that the clown brings. I think that's the same for me. Like it's done something for myself, that chaos in me. When I'm in a clown state, actually, it's okay. Everything's okay. But I'm thinking particularly about working with people living with dementia, about the confusion that comes in for the person living with dementia, for the people caring, and the reason we created these screenings, which started out as dementia-friendly screenings, which have now become anybody come, but they started out particularly because of a fear that people were describing about bringing an elderly parent to the cinema, saying, like, but what if she talks? What if she walks around? And so what I've actually preferred to do is create an environment where it's actually quite chaotic. And actually, if you want to be chaotic, I'm more chaotic than you. So anything you bring, you can't beat me. I'm already doing it, and everybody is, and it's all welcome. And so nothing seems wrong. And that for me, like when there's moments where people realize, I've got the permission to sing at the top of my voice, it's like, yes, it's a delight for me. I think that's what I want to say about that. Is that what you were expecting me to say, or was there something else?
No, I just noticed that this issue came up a lot when I was reading around your website. You were talking a lot about how the laughter has been a way of you kind of taking control of this last year. This is kind of what I was thinking, but then of course I think it plays out in every aspect of your life to sort of embrace the chaos.
Yes, I think I'm a control freak and I look for ways to control things. But of course, you have to meet chaos you can't meet chaos with, I'm going to control. So you've got to kind of come at it like that. There's probably more to say about that, but that will come because I can see Amrita's hand.
Yeah, Amrita, it's coming over to you.
I would actually, I actually don't have a response. A part of my energy and heart is still sitting with actually Jeff's intro when he came on and then he labeled gibberish. And I just want to name that if anyone in the space that's listening, or even someone of us on the panelists, if you felt an impact that felt a little harmful, regardless of your intention, Jeff, I just want to speak to that moment, that the use of labeling this great awakening that's happening and how people are using their voices and they are speaking to their struggles and they are speaking to this greater system of oppression. When you speak to it, people label you as not making sense, as speaking gibberish. So the use of that to say that there's a lot of gibberish in the world right now, it probably sounds like gibberish to you perhaps, or to some folks, because they are not used to hearing from these underrepresented communities that are for the first time speaking up. So I just want to name that if anyone felt that little ouch, I felt it too. And that the specific speaking up and the new languages and terms that sound new to us, but they're not, they've been around for a long time, can be confusing. And it is a growth edge. And I believe that the clown calls us in to look at it because it's an edge of discomfort. It's a vulnerability. So I just wanted to name that, and we can continue on with the question that you had.
Thanks, Amrita. Just coming back to Jeff briefly. What were you referring to when you were talking about the gibberish in the world? Because my sense was that you were talking more about the situation that you're living in Israel and all the strong points of view. That was kind of the sense that I got. Would you like to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think the idea that the world makes sense as it stands, it doesn't make a lot of sense. We have to try and understand things in a new way. Because trying to make sense of what exists at the moment is really challenging, and it hasn't brought us to a good place. So if we have been trying to make sense in all the ways we've tried to make sense, and I talk about our personal situation or the political situation here, for example, all the good intentions haven't brought peace here. Haven't brought peace in this region. So I therefore say that the dialogues that have gone on, we need to have other sorts of dialogues. And the clown, I think, comes from a completely different place. Already, I think a clown comes from a much less judgmental place, much more open-hearted place, a place that if you're in clown, there's something about healing. You've healed something within yourself that you can and played with your pain, allowing you to help others play with their pain and sort that out. Charlie Chaplin said, in order to truly laugh, you must be able to play with your pain. So it's having different conversations as a clown. I think that's what I was talking about, the gibberish out there. It's a lot of things that don't make sense, and it's hard to make sense of them. And trying to find a new language, and clowning, I think, is a good way of doing that.
Thanks, Jeff. Coming back to you, Amrita. Would you like to say anything about how you're meeting chaos through clowning?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that explanation too, Jeff. And I think it's just like an indication where, like, I will say as a woman of color, I've had to be very mindful of like how I show up in a space, the words I use, what I say, how I move through the world. And I don't think everyone has to have that same awareness. So how we move, what we say has an impact on folks. And I do agree that I do very much agree with that sentiment of like, we need to be having different conversations and more specific conversations and naming them. So thank you. So I actually, similarly to Jeff, I actually was really thinking about this question about chaos, and chaos being like a state of utter confusion. And there's been this, I think pre-quarantine, I really felt that, and I believe Jay is going to speak to this in great detail about and within his activism. So I'm going to I'm gonna I'm queuing you up, Jay. I think you're gonna be able to talk to this about the chaos in the world that we see and how do we bring clown into that. And also I very much agree with the merger of activists with artists, and not necessarily purely in the art or purely in activism, but there's a marriage when they come together that creates a greater effect. But speaking to chaos, so I think I actually won't speak to everyone, but I personally felt this inner chaos, a state of utter confusion, awakening to how I personally uphold white supremacy, the even heteronormative structures, and just like waking up to this like chaos within myself, and then seeing the world, and even though it appeared orderly, what looked orderly to me before now looked utterly chaotic. And to be honest, I loved clown so much, and I so wanted it to be the answer. And I'm not totally sold that it is. I had to really recognize the history of clowning that has been rooted in white supremacy, especially celebrating cis-het male figures, and that how can I uphold a structure that has been so painful and harmful to so many people? What is my responsibility as a teacher, as an artist, when I bring this work into a room? How is the Idiot Workshop keeping these voices silent? What are we doing, you know? So it was, it was hard. It's still hard. And I hold at this moment where I am and looking at the pedagogy is like nothing is sacred. I'm looking at it all and addressing it. So in a way, that is the ethos of the clown. You dive into the unknown, you go into the failure, and you're willing to hold that this might fail, that this might not be it. So it's a yin and the yang, right? It's non-duplicity. Like they both, a part of my ability to do this is because of how much I was entrenched in clown training and work and the love of it. And yet the strange thing would be is I could come out of it realizing that this structure is so oppressive. It cannot change. I can't change it. I can be a voice of change. I can do what I can in my community, and then I can build something new. And perhaps I don't even call it clown because that is such, there's so much, you know, I don't know. Everything's on the table. So for me, it's been this, listening a ton, listening, a lot of study, a lot of asking questions, a very humbling time, and a time of meditation. Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, I resonate so much with what you're saying, and I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. The collection of articles that you put in Howl Around this year, end of last year, just so good to delve into all of this stuff and reveal it, to take the lid off, let us all see it and let us all feel our feelings about it. So valuable. Jay, I know you have more to talk about. Over to you.
Well, thank you, Amrita. Thank you, everyone. Really, I mean, for me, just on a personal level, it's really beautiful. Thanks to Robin, actually, who I would like to honor for this thing. I've been thrown back into the world of clown after 15 years of not touching it. And in a way, it felt like a tearing out part of my being. I don't believe there's a division between mind and body. So tearing out part of my being. And it's been great this year to come back to it. And so how chaos and clowning? Well, I mean, as an artist, I felt that I was born in a moment of chaos, a chaos which has names and addresses. I mean, it's called capitalism, it's called colonialism, it's called patriarchy, it's called racism, and there are names or addresses of people who create this chaos. They're normally not in the chaos, they're normally doing really fine, and everyone else is in the chaos. So for me, it's not an abstract, it's something very, very clear. And as an artist, I felt I couldn't just make pictures of chaos. I couldn't just make performances about the collapse of our biosphere. I couldn't just go and make installations about, racism. It didn't make sense. I wanted art to change things. And so, I did theatre school. I went to kind of clown mime school back in the 80s. Then I went to did fine art. I became a performance artist, and I kept doing these performances, and just realized that no one gave a fucking toss. It was the same 500 people that came to see the performances, and it was like, you know, what's the point? And then I was really lucky. I discovered direct action, and that was really this idea of putting your body in the way. And it, for me, it was in anti-roads movements that were destroying communities, human and more than human communities, for road projects, and seeing people actually literally put their bodies in the machinery against the bulldozers to stop the destruction of homes, of houses, or of forests and so on. And I realized, well, here, this was kind of performance, but it was pragmatic. It actually changed things. So I did that for years, and then got involved in the anti-capitalist ultra-globalization movement. And then there was another moment of chaos, which was 9/11. The ultra-globalization movement, so we're talking, you know, 1999, it reaches a peak. You have hundreds of thousands of people protesting against capitalism, from and making links between, you know, fisher folk in Bangladesh with Berlin squatters, with, you know, Zapatistas, indigenous rebellions, with, you know, unionists in Liverpool. I mean, this incredible network. And the global state wanted to destroy it, as they do. They always repress people, not because they're violent or non-violent. The state represses people because they're effective, revolutionary in revolutionary terms. And there was a huge repression just before 9/11. It was at Genoa. Activists were killed in Europe, and which is rare for Europe. We're very privileged. But then 9/11 happened, and the whole movement collapsed. And I remember this moment of chaos and going, wow, what can we do? Everyone is building this. All the activist friends I know are building emotional armor around themselves. Everyone is feeling bad, depressed. What can we do? And then I, with a few other people, had this idea of what would happen if we merged direct action, so literally going to take action, with clowning, and that the clowning itself could be both a good tactic, because power hates to be mocked, and it's also hates confusion, and it was also replacing confrontation with confusion, but also being a therapeutic thing, which links to what Jeff and Susie have been saying as well. This idea that clowning actually can break down emotional armor. And so the idea was to develop this methodology, spread it within the ultra-globalization movement, to heal people from the traumas of repression, to let them feel again. Because I saw so many activists who were started off as activists feeling deeply for the world. And then the more repression they felt, the more, you know, they ended up time in prison or being hit by police batons or tear gassed, the more they built emotional armor. So the whole idea was like, and when you build emotional armor, you're no longer intelligent. So the whole idea was to break down that emotional armor and have a confusing, effective political strategy of direct action. That came out of the chaos.
Thank you. Confusing, effective. Brilliant. Jeff, do you want to speak to this? Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, I like the confusing, effective, and I also like the not knowing and going in there not knowing the answers, but knowing that maybe we need to ask different questions, and knowing that we don't like the answers we've been hearing, and starting to play with other possibilities. But I do, and I'm going to bring it back again I do feel, and something Jay was touching, and to get what I was saying earlier, the trauma behind so much conflict, trauma behind so much conflict. And if we're not addressing that pain, and I was also involved very much in political theatre, where about 10 people would come every week to see it. And it was the same 10 devoted socialists who already believed in everything we were saying on the stage anyway. So I moved into the realization that we need to find a way to really hear each other, really be there, hear each other, and get beyond even get beyond words. And here clowning has a role as well, because clowning has also a non-verbal communication, a very strong non-verbal, physical heart. I always say heart communication. It is almost beyond the way the mind forms words and definitions and categories, and something in that space, within that play, within that listening, deep listening, there is possibility for change. If we don't do that change within ourselves, and I think clowning has helped me to make that changes. If we don't do it within ourselves, it makes it very, very difficult to approach others. It makes it almost dishonest. It makes it dishonest to approach others with that. So I think the honesty and the vulnerability of the clown, or vulnerability of the person in clown, opens up the possibility of honest communication. And this is where things can happen.
Thank you. Thank you. Vulnerability opens up the honesty of others and allows listening to happen. Amrita, you have something else?
Yeah, I just wanted to name a few resources. I love what Jay was saying about direct action, and just putting out there if folks are looking to how to take their clown, their play, and merge it with activism. There's a really great resource, Center for Artistic Activism, c4aa.com. You can look it up. They have training videos. They're really great. Also naming beautifultrouble.org. They have a bunch of tactics in there. And also this thing as well that Jeff said, building on what you said about having a sense of, I wrote it down and now it doesn't make sense what I wrote. Need to find a way to really, I don't know. But this thing about having maybe it was what Jay was saying, this protective armor that we need to build as a result of being like traumatized. Pleasure Activism by Adrienne Maree Brown is also a really great tool. So for the folks listening, if you're like, how do I do this? Like, those are really great resources. And I would just want to pin this, Holly, maybe we come back to it, but I'm so curious about this thing about vulnerability. I know we need it. I know it's a part of the clown. And yet, and also it's needed for us to feel so much that we are called to action, that we are called to movement. And also as the clown, for us to feel so much that then we can be. And then I'm really, it's like there are people that are afforded a vulnerability and other folks aren't. And I'm really asking, how do I don't have an answer. So, we don't have to answer this now, but just it's like, how do we as a community, how do I create a space for vulnerability? Is vulnerability the only way? How do we dip into it? Do we dip out? Like, what is it? And then I will also name that it is it's a term that we use a lot today. And perhaps I really appreciated, Jeff, what you said. This is what it was. It was like getting beyond words. So if we can put the term vulnerability, what is there a somatic state? What does that state feel like beyond words? Because I think people say, I'm being vulnerable, but I'm not so sure all the time anymore. So I want to just throw that into the conversation as well.
Really valid. Yeah, I'm going to just throw in a little bit of my stuff as well here, because I think vulnerability is really central to the work that I do as a drama therapist and clown therapist. And I agree with you that the stakes are higher for different people. To touch in with vulnerability means different things to different people. And for some people, it's not safe. It won't be safe because of whatever stories they're holding in their bodies or whatever trauma they're holding. Sometimes it's not safe to go to those places. So is it possible to clown without delving into vulnerability? That's a really good question to have you got any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, I think vulnerability is the place, how I perceive it, there's a place where we've dropped all the masks, where we're prepared to say we are insecure, we don't know what we're doing, we're trying our best here, we want to be out there and have support for who we are, we're trying not to be anything other than deeply human, caring, loving, and compassionate. That's what we're trying to be. And somehow we're covering that up with so many different personas, and stripping ourselves of that and reaching that place. And that seems to be the heart of so much clown work, and to the point where they would say, Bieland about the red nose being the smallest mask in the world. And being able to be there, it's being able to be there, and it's in a state that you don't have to apologize for who you are, essentially who you are. And the clown gives us the strength in that vulnerability. And it's the clown role that gives us the strength to be in that place.
I saw Susie had her hand up a minute ago, so we'll come over to Susie in a moment. But Jeff, while we're with you, I was just reading the paper that you co-authored about working with groups of people in Israel in rehab, so using clowning for recovery from addiction. And in the paper, you were talking about people coming from very different cultural backgrounds all together in this space where they are stepping into clowning to learn something about themselves and to find their way to recovery. Can you talk about how that is to have different people with different cultural kind of references in the same group, and what you do to kind of make that a safe space for people to let their guard down and take off their masks?
And I think here it's interesting because through this work, there is almost a sense of we are going to go into a completely new space here, the clown space, which is intentionally going to provoke us and intentionally going to challenge us, and is intentionally going to put us in another place other to where we've been. And it's going to put us in a place where we feel that intense pain that brought us to the drugs, that brought us to the addictions, because addictions, we know more and more, is out of emotional pain. And saying that's what we all share as humans beyond our cultural differences. Something universal about that pain. So it's expressed in different ways, it's expressed in different cultures, it's amplified in different ways. It's amplified in different parts of the world. It's amplified through capitalism, it's amplified through colonialism, all the isms that we've mentioned that are destructive and that have amplified people's pain. That very deep first pain of saying, I haven't met the world with unconditional love. I haven't been given unconditional love. I haven't been accepted for who I am, deeply being accepted for who I am. I've been abused on so many levels. And this is where people meet. And this is where people meet. And the clown starts off with just saying, I just want to hug you. I just want to hug you at that place. And I say, really, the whole work was all about just being able to hug. Patch Adams said it beautifully. I think Patch Adams put it really brilliantly. He said, clowning is just a trick to bring more love closer to others. I think really that's it. So that's where we meet. That's where we meet. And we slowly, as a result of that intention and being in that space, the masks drop off and people go into that space.
Thank you. So talking about Patch Adams, I know Susie, have you done more than one outing to Morocco with Patch?
I've just done one. So he runs these clown missions where you travel as a clown and you don't bring any of your ordinary clothes, and it's a 10-day thing. And sure, the hospital work, the orphanages, this is really, really powerful. But actually, the really powerful times for me were just out on the street, walking from place to place. Particularly in Morocco, there was something about the heart that just got touched immediately by the people there. The number of people who would just greet us as clowns and they would just say, God is with you right now, and thank you for being here. And actually, I think that was where I really understood that this is about love. This is about me just saying, I just want to love you. And from there, I've been through a whole process of doing work in hospitals where I was a clown. Our noses were removed because no one likes clowns in England. And then going, but what do I do without my nose? So this kind of reminded me the nose is really powerful, but actually, I don't need the nose. Actually, I can just take that with me everywhere. So just anywhere I go, greeting people, like it was actually Patch that really told me about this, about just when you are traveling in a railway station and you take the lift with somebody, what's it like to just turn to them and just have a really deep breath and see them and say, how's your day? And just simply breathe with them. That for me has been just overwhelmingly powerful. And it wasn't it took a really long time before somebody said, this is social action, what you're doing here. And I can get caught up in hearing you guys be talking about all of the really, big picture stuff that you're doing and think that my stuff is small. But actually, when I really step into it, I can say, this is big. It's really important to just be with every human I ever meet. And breath is actually what I learned that a lot from the laughter. But when I'm working in a hospital, particularly when I step into a room, it always starts with a breath and an openness to me offering, I don't know anything. You do. And I'm really waiting for you to tell me what there is, because I'm stepping into this room. There's a chaos that we can't see. It's bubbling under everybody's, in everybody's belly that's in the room. They're all going, wow, we don't know, how long are we going to be here? And I just go in, and maybe comes, maybe they say, what's that? But all I'm ever doing is saying, I want to love you. And I never tell people. This has been something that's just come out more and more with the laughter that I've been doing in the last year, the community that's built. And I told them a few weeks ago, I said, actually, everything I do is about love. But I don't tell people that because that's too scary. That's it for now from me.
Oh, thank you, Susie. I was thinking about sustainability. I mean, I'm always thinking about sustainability, but I was just thinking about, what sort of where we've got to here with the clown as the bastion of love and presence. Again, I come with a question: what sustains us? What makes that possible? And I know, Jay, from listening to some of your talk that you did for Robin's Activist Clown Toolkit workshop, you were talking about the discrepancy between he's disappeared. I'm asking him a question. Between the clown and the activist, and there's a kind of pull between those two forces. Would you like to speak a bit about that?
So the pull between the force of the, can you just slightly, I haven't quite got it.
Yeah, what I picked up on when I was listening to you speaking was you were talking about actually the artist and the clown, the artist and the activist are operating at very different frequencies, have very different rhythms, and also have very different needs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the reasons I love clown, and it was super interesting hearing Amrita say, that she felt it was a very patriarchal, world, which is true to an extent, but I always try and look at the origins of clowning, which for me are kind of our shamanic practices. I mean, that's a whole long story. Who claims practices we have now came from basically shamans continuing to do their shamanic rituals, but the fact that shamanism was now a dead religion, they became performances, they became theatre, because actually no one had the meaning anymore. And what the shaman for me are, they're always these non-binary figures. They're neither male nor female. They're both sky and earth. They're both dead and alive because they resurrect. They do death and resurrection. They really are these non-binary figures. And I think I've always been interested in breaking down all forms of binaries, and especially the binary between art and life. And if you look at this idea of the division between art and life, it's really recent. Most cultures don't have a word for art. You know, this idea is a Western, patriarchal, white, metropolitan European idea. The idea that you have a performance that's separate from life that you watch. If you went to a city before the 1750s in Europe, there were no concert halls because music was always integrated into ritual, is integrated into life. You didn't, and so this idea that you have this contemplative form that you look at is deep. It was developed by the ruling classes to evict popular culture and to create this fine, contemplative, detached idea. And I think this binary of art and life still is deep within us, and I think we have to break that. Like we have to break all the binaries. For me, you know, the definitions of art that interest me are such as Alan Capro, who says art is simply paying attention, and that goes back to this idea of presence and vulnerability, of paying attention, of being there, and paying attention to what you do, which can be the way you make a stir fry, or the way you design your house, or the way you design your garden, or the way you design a blockade of a fossil fuel corporation, or the way you make love, or the way you design education. I mean, that's what art always used to be. It could be anything, as long as it was done with grace and skill. And grace comes from gratitude. It comes from the French grâce à. It means to give back. It means reciprocity. And I think if we have to break this non-binary, this binary dualistic culture, which divided art and life, which is divided nature and culture, then actually we have to enter the commons. And the commons is about giving back, always giving back to the earth, giving back to our ancestors, giving back to those who nourish us, which is the opposite of extractivist culture, which is this idea of taking. And so much art takes and doesn't give back. And I think in clowning, there is really this potential of commoning and reciprocity.
So I come back to my earlier question, which is what sustains us? What sustains us as clowns, as activists, to be able to give, to be able to continuously open our hearts? That could be for Jay, or it could be for anyone.
I've spoken enough. Someone else, I'm sure, can.
Amrita.
You know, that's such a, gosh, there's so many powerful things that have been said, and I just, what sustains us. So I want to speak to medical clowning a little bit. So I've done medical clowning here in, I'm not in here in Los Angeles, but in Los Angeles, and it's been in the pediatric ward, and these are children seeking long-term care. So they're staying in the hospital. They are possibly not going to make it, right? So they're on an edge, and there is a space in which you enter, in which the way that Susie, Jeff, that you were talking about the clown, it's like, I think because you're in the presence of, you're on that edge. Also, Jay, you talked about that edge of life and death, that between that, it calls forward in you this just a generosity and love that is a place of the clown. And so something to me about the environment and the who you were speaking to, because the clown is so relational, that brings forth like your way of playing. Now, when we talk about the binary, for example, how do we disrupt this notion of the binary? For me, the clown is really powerful. And I think we have to bring out the trickster. So we're talking about shamanism, these old indigenous roots of the clown, even in clowning in India, for example, like there is a trickster that's present because it was disrupting. It was, so there's actually, it makes me think that there's the clown, perhaps we have even imposed a binary on the clown and made it very, only sweet kind of, but I want to be really careful because I also think like, again, in medical clowning, that is like 100% like, there's no place for the trickster. It is really a beautiful, generous, like Susie, like when you said that, like, what I do is everything is about, I do is about love. Like yes, in medical clowning, it's so operating there. And then when I think about some of the street activism, or even when I perform as who I am and the different masks and the stories, Jeff, to underline what you said, and Holly, even what you were naming about therapeutic clowning, it's like, of course there's a trickster available, you know, for me to really like kind of get people somewhere, and then there will be a humanity. So I guess to answer your question, we have to acknowledge who and where we are, and also the space in which we are entering and the people that we are speaking to. And I love this thing of like shattering binaries. And I do believe the clown is really powerful to one to do it. Yeah.
Thanks. That actually, you know what, you touched on a question. We got a question from Cherry Bomb, which wasn't really a question, it was more of a statement saying, in Australia, the trickster came up in campfire conversations, decolonialisation from an Indigenous perspective. And that's great that you landed on the trickster as an archetype. It's one of the faces of the clowns. And the trickster can take any shape, any form. It's a shapeshifter. It's naughty. It's the naughty side of clown, and I think it's an energy that isn't tapped into enough. I don't think. I mean, in my work, I work with the clown and the fool as the two kind of main archetypes. But I'm interested in the trickster. But for me, the trickster is chaos. The trickster is the one that like leads you into come with me. I'm going to take you to a brilliant place. It's never going to end well if you follow the trickster. So yeah, that's an interesting place to get to, coming back to chaos and the trickster. Jay.
There we go. Yeah, I mean, for me, you know, I think if I have a little stone on my altar, which is a stone from the temple of Hermes, and Hermes was the Western trickster god who changed shape, and for me it's always a reminder that, you know, I think especially in a post-Enlightenment Western world, we are obsessed with light, you know, the age of the light, the lumière. We're obsessed with good and everything, and we forget that actually death is what sculpts life. You know, we forget the darkness. We're always towards pleasure. We're always towards, and I think for me, the trickster is this constant reminder that actually nothing evolves without disruption. Nothing, you know. Think of a forest fire. You know, a lot of complex adaptive ecological systems have these embedded events such as a forest fire, which actually push the forest to evolve faster. And that's, you know, we need these moments of disruption. If we think about, you know, this disruption and chaos that has been caused by the epidemic, you know, a similar moment of global disruption, different scale, different time, is you know, the First World War. The massacre of the trenches, the end of empires, massive chaos. What came out of that, and I'm talking about a Western European tradition here, which is the one I inhabit, is Dada. You know, it's a different way. And quantum physics, both these things, and jazz. You know, jazz, quantum physics, and Dada come out of this moment of chaos and rethink everything. You know, abolish the division between art and life. And I think we're in a similar exciting moment right now, and it's the time for the tricksters. It's the time to you know, we've been disrupted. Let's push that disruption just a bit more and see what happens.
More chaos, more chaos. So we have reached the mark where we can invite some people. We're going to continue this conversation in a moment, but we now have the possibility of bringing you up onto screen as well, audience. Would you like to come and hang out with us on screen? If you would, can you find the raise hand button and press your raise hand button, and Robin will elevate you to being panelists. So we're going to continue, but now we can hear from you. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask, if you've got something you'd like to talk about from your own practice, from your own perspective. We have been all places tonight. We have been to love, we've been to conflict, we've been to trickster, we've been everywhere. So what's coming up for you? What would you like to ask about, or what would you like to share. And if you're still at home and not on the screen, you can still use the Q&A button, and I'll try and weave that in. Somebody have something they want to say? It's Marion.
Hi, Holly and everybody. Nice to meet you all. I'm really interested in the things that people have been saying about relationality, and also the binary way that we understand the world, and the various categories that we have for things, for people, identities, and I wonder how clown can help us, I don't know, get rid of it, transform it, create a world where we can just keep getting closer as fellow human beings. You know, I'm a woman. I know it's hellish to live in a patriarchy. I have an identity. There's a political structure, social structure that's oppressive. So I in no way mean to not be thoughtful about that, but I have traveled with Patch Adams, and I do believe clowning is a trick to bring love closer. And I love the conversation about love, but maybe it was Amrita that you mentioned relationality. Even that word is so resonant for me. I just wanted to keep deepening or discovering things about how we can break out of categories that separate us ultimately, rather than bring us closer. But I could also be really wrong about that. But it's something that I'm 65, and I've seen this conversation morph and change and become what it is today. And maybe it's generational, but I just want to keep that leg of the conversation, or that string of the conversation going, because it's so important as we get torn asunder, torn apart, and yet we're human. We share our humanity, ultimately.
Thanks, Marion. Would anybody like to speak to that? Amrita.
Could I actually, that's such a, I want to say two things. One is, hello, John Davison. I was going to plug his class because I really believe that part of our work is to study the history. So I highly recommend his class, and now he's here. Throw it in the chat, John. And two, Marion, I love this question, and I'm actually going to turn it back to you and embracing the ethos of the clown, that like we have our answers. So how would you answer that? What's your answer?
I would like to create a world where we abolish all categories. Is that possible? I have no fucking idea. It seems just ridiculous, but who but clowns could do that, right? And I think that clowns, comedians, actors, performers are the hope of the world, because we can perform other than who we are. We can become, we can be who we're becoming. We can do things that we can't do right now with the structures in place. So that's how I think about clown. Thanks for, that's very Jewish of you to answer my question with a question.
Thanks,
so appreciate
Marion.
that.
I see, Anna, you've got your hands up.
I think it's a state of mind, Marion. If you don't believe in the categories, they don't exist.
Thanks, Anna.
Thank you.
Susie, I saw you had your hand up. And then John.
Just really briefly, to go back to me saying about when I was in Morocco, everybody was saying, oh gosh, Morocco's a tricky place to go. Make sure you wear a wedding ring, and make sure, you know, be very careful as a woman. Nobody saw me as a woman. That's all I want to say.
Because you were a clown. Mm-hmm.
There you go.
I want to I want to refer back to that love again. That love is the unifying force. And here, where we talked about the clown, yes, there has to be a trickster element to the clown. It's not just love. You know, yeah. And the clown disrupts. The clown almost disrupts anything else that is anything else but love. So anything that is outside of that it can be disrupted by the clown, and rightfully so, I think. So the clown will interfere with or provoke people with categories and definitions and challenge all that. And I think the clown's role is to challenge that status quo. It's to break down those conflicts, those opposing sides. And through the unification, what we do as in invoking the clown, we find that unity within ourselves to help others to find that within themselves, and hopefully project that onto the society. So I'm getting Marion, everything's moving around a lot.
Thanks, Jeff. John, yeah, coming down to you, John Davison.
Yeah, thanks. I'm concerned. I'm going to throw some negative trickster stuff in. I'm very concerned about talking about clowns and clowning as kind of we're all the same. We can all be equally vulnerable is the suggestion, because it sounds like all lives matter, basically, which we all know is a false ideology. Well, I hope we all know. I speak that for me. That's a false. I would share people's desire for us all to be share love and to be equal and see our common humanity. Absolutely. But how do we get there? At the moment, we're nowhere near that. We live in a highly politicized, highly power imbalanced society globally. And this year, particularly the last year, we've seen sort of huge, chaotic, if you like, we want to call it chaos, sort of coming up as a result of that. And to be provocative, how can we ask already vulnerable communities to be more vulnerable? How can we ask people of color in the US who are vulnerable to police violence and murder to be more vulnerable? How can we ask trans people around the world who are vulnerable to violence and death to be more vulnerable? How can we ask women to be more vulnerable as subject to male violence, and so on and so on? I don't see vulnerability as a useful tool for us right now. I would like to, and that's with, coming from where I've come from. I know all the arguments for it, and it's a great thing. But I think I feel we need to put it in brackets for the moment because it's not working. So I just wanted to throw that in because I don't know what comes after. But I think if we could just put that aside for the moment and look at what's actually happening in terms of power structures. And for example, for me, starting from teaching, how can I teach or indulge in be involved in clowning outside of my own privileged position? So I'm interested to know what comes next if we put that aside. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Thank you, John. Your sound was doing some very strange things there. But I think we got the gist of it. The question is, there's been this whole movement towards embracing your vulnerability, but is this appropriate for people of colour? Is this appropriate for trans people? Is this appropriate for women who've experienced trauma or abuse? And what comes next? Would anybody like to speak to that? Amrita.
I love this question, and I thank you so much for naming it. So yes, we also have to acknowledge that majority of the clown shows you see, majority of the clown communities, it's toxic masculinity. There's yes, this expression of love that you also see, but there's also all of this. So how can we speak about clown being this utopian, beautiful, just love and peace, when we also know that the predominant work that's being made, that's being elevated, that wins the awards, all that kind of stuff, it feels like cognitive dissonance. So I just really, really appreciate you naming that, because we are, I would say, we are responsible. We, all of us who are in the community that love this work, we have to really face what the community is and what this work is. And we have to, when we hear people name it, stand with them and be allies and be like, I stand with you, I see it too. So I really want to, I really, really appreciate, John, you naming that. And then, but your question of like, how can we ask already? I actually am with you. I don't know, but I do think the first thing and what we've done is naming it is really important. And then getting into a room and trying and creating the safe, like we have to try to find a way. If we really believe in this work and we believe that everyone should have it, and we really believe in the power of it, then we have to be willing to find a way to make it accessible to people. How do we adjust it? So, but it does begin by acknowledging that it is a oppressive art form that has kept voices out.
Yeah, I'm back to thinking about, do we call it something else? I really liked your earlier point there, because I think I don't associate what I do with the Gollier training or the Lecoq training that is kind of the absolute opposite of what it is that I offer, which is to offer a celebratory and safe space where you can take your space and explore who you are and explore being seen and seeing others in a conscious way. That's what I'm offering in my training. And I come back to what you were saying. Is it clowning? Who owns this word clown? Does clown belong to Gollier and Lecoq, who, for people who don't know, that the big schools in Paris that have quite vicious training techniques that aim to really help you find your clown by saying, no, not that, until you reveal something beautiful about yourself. I don't work in that way. I work the opposite way, to gently coax people out. So yes, that's anybody else want to talk about vulnerability? What happens after vulnerability, or is vulnerability essential in clown training? Robin?
Just to stay in the chat, there's some comments on this following this line of comms, if you wanted to pick those up.
Thanks for that. Oh, look, loads. Okay, right. I wasn't looking at them. I had something in the way. Yes. Okay. I think we need to share vulnerability, and I don't know, and I think we need to create radically inclusive environments. Yeah, I think that's the key. I think that is the key. Is vulnerability a tool to enable empathy? Can be. Yeah. Oh, okay. So there is some desire here for Jay to speak a little bit more about the clown army, the frontline activism clowning. So that's only if we're done with this subject of vulnerability and clowning. Is there anybody else that wants to say anything else about vulnerability and clowning before we move on?
Yeah, I do definitely want to address what John was saying. And in my experience with working with very vulnerable populations, the clown has given them a strength within that vulnerability to be able to look at it from a different place and feel less pain and more joy out of life as a result of not just feeling the downside of vulnerability in terms of the exploitation or the exposure to abuse as a result of being vulnerable. So being vulnerable in a very strengthening and empowering way. That's my work with addictions. And the other thing is, I think a lot of oppression comes as a result of people, as a lot of men as well. We talked about patriarchy or society, not being able to be vulnerable, and as moment they felt their vulnerability, oppressing others in order to put up those defenses and put up those defenses so high that nobody can reach them. And here the clown can have an impact with those who are the oppressors and help them reach that place of, and therefore being able to guide their life more by love and less by oppression. So yeah, I felt that was important to address John's stuff.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff. Oh, Jordan.
Hi guys, it's a great conversation. Something that comes up for me is this kind of all or nothing mindset where you're inviting people into vulnerability, and then it's just this all the time vulnerable. You can just be totally vulnerable in the world, where that may be the clown playing and showing that as an option through performance. But I guess for me, having been attacked by the police and been through some interesting traumatic experiences where the thing is just to close down all the way. And I guess what I would see the performance points at is a choice point to be open when it's safe and to be open to the community. I mean, I'm just a baby clown, so I'm curious what y'all think about that.
Anybody want to speak to that? Oh, it's gone a bit quiet.
Well, I'll speak to it. I think there's a huge value in being vulnerable within a community. So I'm part of a group of women that practice, I won't go into it, but certain tools or whatever. And we are very vulnerable with each other very deeply. But to John's point and Jordan's point, I don't know that I would go out. I don't know that I would do the same thing if it was a mixed group of men and women. It's a certain space that's created to explore that, experience that, and then each person can decide if and when it's appropriate. I agree that there are environments where I'm not going to be emotionally vulnerable because I could get really hurt. So I agree. I don't think there's a blanket statement to be made. And vulnerability is, I'm just thrilled we're having this conversation. It's really interesting. And I really appreciate John sort of beginning us down this road, because I haven't really I haven't thought about this in this way. So I just feel appreciative of the conversation, mostly, I wanted to say.
So I'm going to finish this bit and then we're going to move on to Jay, because we want to find a little bit more about the clown army. So I want to talk a little bit about my work, because the vulnerability is really central to my practice as a clown therapist, as a clown teacher, as a drama therapist. And it can only happen within very structured environment. In my teaching room, there are really, really clear boundaries. There's a really clear, I'm really upfront with what we're doing. I explain what we're doing and why we're doing it. And there are loads and loads of exercises for people to create bonds with each other. We do a lot of play where people find their bonds with each other and start to build the trust. And it's only through creating that environment that it is possible to start taking off your masks and to start, being yourself and showing bits of yourself to other people. And it feels... the conditions are absolutely essential. And I spent 3 years training as a drama therapist and did a master's so that I could learn how to hold that space where people can safely drop into their vulnerability or find a safe enough route into their vulnerability. And as a participant in other people's workshops, it doesn't always feel safe to do that in clown workshops. And in some clown workshops, I just can't close down and I don't want to show anything of myself because I don't feel safe. I don't feel like I'm allowed to fully be myself in this space. So my pedagogy is formed over years and years of going to other people's clown workshops and having a shit time and feeling like I'm not allowed here because I'm too weird, because I'm too ridiculous, because there's a lot wrong with me. I don't quite fit here. So not wanting to show much of myself because it didn't feel safe to. So I think it is possible to create environments, because I do it, where people can step in their power however they are and clown from the place where they find themselves. I don't think there's a standard thing called clown. I don't think there is a standard version of it. I think that the work for me as a clown teacher is to pull out what's already there to go, oh, there it is, let's bring that out. So everybody's clown is different. There's no standard version of it. And yeah, and some clowns are really gnarly, and some clowns are all full of love, and some clowns have many different sides, and it's a wonderful process. But yeah, I think it takes a lot of skill to be able to hold that space, and a lot of learning and a lot of experience to be able to really hold that strong, steady space where people can show themselves and be accepted. And part of that is creating the trust and the safety between all the participants. So look, I'm going to round off vulnerability there, because I could talk about this forever and ever and ever. But look, there was a request for Jay to talk a little bit more about the rebel army and frontline clowning.
I didn't see was there a particular question in the request, or
no, just people really wanting you to talk about it?
Yeah, I actually.
What should I'll go on. There was a voice.
Jay,
no?
I actually did. Look, I've been doing circus and clowning for about 18 years, and more recently, my work has been coming out as clown in activism. So, been doing some Red Rebel clowning and de-escalation, and I just love to talk more about how we can raise the clown army across the globe for a force for good, and that de-escalation, I suppose, which is being vulnerable, but bringing compassion and love and joy and everything we've spoken about, and how we bring that as activists in frontlining with clowning. So I'd love to hear more from you on that.
Well, it's super interesting. You put the point. So I deserted the clown army after 4 years. So being the one of the originators and one of the first deserters, and one of the reasons was well, there are many reasons, but one link to this de-escalation. The other reason, which I'll come to at the end, but the other reason was, so the idea of the clown army was really to go and do direct action in the logic of clown. It wasn't to go on a protest dressed up as a clown. It wasn't to pretend to be a clown. It was to find a clown, and then with the logic of the clown, go and fuck shit up, basically, in a creative, chaotic way. So, one of the first actions the clown army ever did was to go into an army recruitment agency during the Iraq War, the second Iraq War, in Leeds, in Northern England, and try to, as an army, in our army gear, to try and join the army, because we knew how to liberate people, and apparently the British Army was liberating people in Iraq, so we were clowns, we knew how to liberate people, so please, we're going to join the army. So we tried to fill in the forms, and we caused complete chaos, and they had to close down the recruitment agency for the day, and we set up our fake very bad recruitment agency outside. So that was the idea, direct action. You go and block stuff. You don't just go and give love to people, because there are enemies, and those enemies need to be stopped. And the problem was too much. We had a slogan. One of the slogans of the clown army was "Make war with love." So it was this paradox. We were very inspired by the Zapatistas, who talked about a listening revolution, who talked about the incredible importance of political paradox. And the problem was that actually there was way too much love and not enough trickster, not enough bouffon in the clown army. And people started to think it was about a de-escalation process. It was never. None of the stuff we developed ever was about de-escalating. It was about replacing confrontation with confusion, which is not necessarily de-escalating. If actually we think politically it was useful to up the conflict, then you do it as a clown. So we weren't the police on protest, and I have a fear that that's what the clowning became. I don't believe you change the world. The world is changed through conflict, and that's, if anyone who knows history, it's that, every right we have, the right to wear trousers, the right to have a weekend, the right to use contraception, came because of a conflict, came because people disobeyed the norms of their time. They broke the laws, they went to prison, they were killed, even for the right to wear trousers for women, So I think, for me, what would a new Robin and Hillary was one of the co-founders of the Clown Army with us. We're trying to look at the Clown Army in the future. What would it be? And how could we do, and what could we learn? So it would be great to talk to folk hear about these questions, because for me, the other important thing in any revolutionary situation is to mix the yes and the no. To mix the yes, the clown always says yes. And we can't have movements that always just say, no, no more war, no more patriarchy, no more fossil fuels, colonization. You know, you have to show an alternative. You have to show other ways of living. Otherwise, it's not interesting. But if you just do that, then the whole system is going to continue. The death machines of capitalism are going to continue to destroy everything. So there's no point, you know, if we've just got a really lovely hippie gardens and permaculture gardens and cycle paths, you know, they're going to be underwater or destroyed if we don't block stuff as well. So for us, the key is this paradox between saying yes and saying no. And I had the privilege to be living right here on this bocage, on this wetlands. Where I'm sitting here would have been an airport runway if people hadn't actually been putting their lives into conflict and saying, no, we don't want an airport, but at the same time, setting up farms, setting up bakeries, setting up breweries, setting up pirate radio stations, setting up a whole community that said, yes, this is the world we prefer rather than an airport.
Oh, I hope you got what you wanted there, Cherry. And Shane, I've seen you've just appeared. We're nearly at the end. In fact, we've just run over a little bit. But Shane, I saw you just appeared. Did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's more towards Jay and I suppose Robin. I suppose obviously I'm quite lucky to have Hilary Ransom as my lecturer at uni at the minute. Do you see the Rebel Clown Army re-emerging at any point soon?
Talk about it, Robin. Talk about what you've got planned. Can you, or is it secret?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we are working on a project, Jay and Hilary and I, to revisit the Clown Army for this time, a time that the protest scene as landscape is completely different. Clowning, we've got loads to address in terms of decolonization. There's so much to look at. So the project at the moment is meeting some of the veterans of the Circa that was around 2003 to 2006 to gather stories and some learning from that period, and then to do some work late in the year through residencies to come together with old and new activists and clowns to look at the clown. The clown, is it the right form? Is the army the right form? Find a new methodology and hopefully get to COP26 and try stuff out.
Great. Thank you.
So if you want to know more, we'll pop that in the email as well, and we can keep you informed with that project and how to get involved or hear more. Yeah.
Oh, that's an offer to bring the Clown Army to the States. Yeah. Brilliant. Look, we are winding up, but Jordan, you've got your finger up. You'd like to say something. So maybe we've got time for, you know, a couple more people. If there's something you really want to share.
Yeah, I guess this is just really alive for me because I'm hearing a lot of European activists say this, and you know, the streets of Portland, you know, the activists are very haggard. I've been going, you know, straight through protesting every night since the, you know, really well documented police killing. And I think that all of this creative things started to go away because we get tracked so hard. And, you know, everybody has to be completely unidentifiable. And, you know, a lot of scary stuff was happening to people, you know, just getting pulled off the street and shipped to detention centers in Chicago. And like, it's not fun anymore. So yeah, I'm just curious, as I'm like just recently been charged with a felony, just what this could look like when we kind of feel like we're being hunted down.
Thank you. And I see Amrita's got your hand up, and you wrote about this in the article in Howl Around, talking about it stemmed from a question in John Davidson group in clown theory. A question went in there that said, is clowning appropriate in times of protest? Is the clown, what was it, something like that? Is the clown, is the clown appropriate? And then this whole amazing collection of articles has emerged from that. Over to you.
Yeah, Jordan, I just want to acknowledge what you've named, and that it's very painful and draining, and just to also thank you for keeping it up. So yeah, I think just all of us taking a collective breath to acknowledge, like, you're on the streets and you're in it. So that's a lot. And yeah, we really struggled here. I have community in Chicago too. It was like, I'm not sure that our way of clowning, even if it's in the trickster, is what these movements are asking us to show up as. So I really agree. It's actually like underlying what Jay said as well. So it's just building on that. And you have to first ask yourself, what is the movement calling for? What is my responsibility? How can I show up to move the needle towards change? And I agree that it's not just being all about love, and not just about showing utopian, like idealistic. It's like about, you are saying no and then showing, it's both. It's this paradox. So Jordan, I will say, as an American, we've really struggled with, I shouldn't say struggled, it was very clear, honestly. The clown was not the mode in which to show up in these movements. And that doesn't mean that our play, the things we know as artists, all the tools that we have, can't be used to show up in support of these movements. It forces us to think differently, to think out of the box, to really ask, what is needed? What am I being called to do? And it's a mixture of pure activism, of writing the boring stuff, pure activism, making calls, talking to your neighbors, talking to your family, moving the needle there. And it's also artistic activism. And it could also be purely in the world of art as well at times. We have to think of really holistic, all these words are like just words. We want to think of actions that have, there are many, many things, and your piece might be a little piece of a bigger thing that you are doing as a group. But also get on Signal, I'm sure you know about it, and take a break. I'm just quoting stuff from Adrienne Maree Brown, and it's much more important for you to be generated and be taking care of yourself, because the harm that you're taking on right now becomes the seed that follows you for a long time. And really, we need you, we need you to also be healing and taking care of yourself. So take breaks, I would say.
Thank you. Super useful. So look, we are coming to the end of our time together. It's been incredible. This conversation is one of my favorite conversations for a long, long time. And I know we haven't finished. I know there's still a lot more to be talked about. There's so many hot, interesting themes that have emerged out of this discussion. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much to the panel. Thank you to Susie Harvey, Jeff Gordon, Jay Jordan, Amrita DHALIWAL. Thank you so much for bringing yourselves and your practice. And thank you to the audience for your ears and for your thoughts and for everything. Thank you to Robin for your backstage work. And thank you to Bea for administrating this event. And do you know what? You're brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for being here.